I've been working with Start Gallery for a couple of years now, and this is the first online art fair that we've taken part in, and it's really exciting. We were saying just now that we wouldn't have done this without COVID, so it's something to be thankful for. And yeah, we've been working here in our studios in Windhoek. It's great to see you all.
Thanks, Vicky. Fantastic. Maybe if I can hand over to Philippus, if you can just tell us who you are, where you're coming to us from, how you're doing.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Philippus Shehaman, and I'm in Windhoek in my studio. This is the studio where I have been working during a lockdown, and I'm also happy for this opportunity that we also are allowed to showcase what we have been doing during the lockdown. And thank you so much for your effort. So this is perfect. I'm happy to see you all. Thank you for joining us and view our work.
Thanks so much, Philippus. Wonderful to see you guys coming from your studios. Alicia, I see you're in front of your printmaking section. Maybe you can give us a little more introduction where you're coming from.
Yes, thank you. I'm Alicia Nidishange. I'm joining you from a studio house in Windhoek, where I do my sculpture and printmaking.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Wonderful. So our three artists, the stars of the show tonight. I'm just going to hand over to Helen, who's going to start a screen share and just walk us through the virtual exhibition and give us a little bit more insight, and we'll be hearing a bit more from the artists as we go as well.
Hi, everybody. Like Gina said, I'm going to be screen sharing. You're also all welcome to navigate the exhibition on your own. So there is a link to the exhibition that Gina's putting in the chat now. So you can either go through it with me at my pace, or if you want to explore separately, please feel free. So the exhibition opens on a close-up view of Philippus Shihama's work called Collapsing Identity. This, oh, for some reason I'm not, there we go. I really love this close-up because it shows you the incredibly intricate work that Philippus does. You can see the small wire connections between the Makalani shells and the bottle caps that have been flattened. So this work is quite painstaking and delicate. So I'll take you straight down to this work over here. Philippus uses a lot of recycled materials in his work. He creates these pieces that are very much like textiles, but also have an incredibly beautiful sculptural quality. So I'm going to hand over to Philippus right now to talk a bit more about it if he wants to. And as I speak, as he speaks, I'll also move through the images on the screen. So if you'd like to go ahead, Philippus.
Thank you for the opportunity. Like I said, I'm also happy to see you and happy to show what I have done during the lockdown. I started thinking of what I want to do, and I wanted to work with something that I relate to, something that could represent me. I was also thinking about cultural knowledge constructions. So I thought of working with subject or the cultural object, the object that represent me, and the object that represent also my own identity. And it has a lot to do with my upbringing. So for me, it's a very good thing to
Okay, we seem to have lost connection with Philippus.
Explore the materials that related to the reason why it was, you can see that macaroni nuts with bottle caps of alcohol. And yes, alcohol, those are the objects that for me it is culture or colonial objects, and it has affected more youth, and mostly they even have forgotten their own identity. They have forgotten their own culture, and for me it has affected this generation, and they didn't have knowledge at all about their own culture. Most of them, they even forget about their language and the way they came from, because if you cannot speak your own language, it's like you forget about your background. The other one, it has the combination of horns for animals and the macaroni nuts. The horns of animals stitched together, and the stitch and the constructions, it's about putting together what has been collapsed, like those identity. We needed to stand up and put together what it destroyed in the past. Perhaps if we have more activities, youth participating in art activities, they would do something that is more constructive, and they engaged on constructive activities that builds their own culture, or start to respect and appreciate what it's belonged to them. And as well, also the horns, it's a kind of animal, which is also a part of our natural resources. And in many cases, people have been destroying these natural resources. They have been killing all the animals, and I'm happy that now there is some laws in place to protect the nature.
Great, thank you so much, Philippus.
All right, welcome.
That was great. If you have any questions at any point in time, you're welcome to put those in the chat, and we'll get to those at the end of the session. But for now, I'm just going to scroll back up to the beginning of the exhibition. This is an artwork, a sculpture by Alicia called The Dress of Power. This is part of a larger body of work that Alicia has really brought together this year in a solo exhibition called The Insight of Intrusive Woman. I think something unfortunate about the fact that this is a virtual exhibition is you don't really get to feel the presence of the works physically in space. And this work especially is quite large. It's about 2 meters high. And I think that that's something that I'd like you all to imagine while we look through this piece. So for this body of work, Alicia is really talking about the experience of being a woman in Namibia. But I think if you're happy to, Alicia, I'd like to hand over to you to say a couple of words. Alicia?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I'm not sure if you heard me. I just said if you want to say a couple of words about this work or about the rest of the works in this body, then you're welcome to.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Okay, is that a problem that other people are experiencing as well? Can everybody hear me? Okay. All right. So I'll just say, Alicia, if you want to, maybe, Gina, would you mind putting in the chat to Alicia that if she wants to say something about her work, now is the time to jump in.
Okay, yes, I want to say something that I will just talk in general, because in most cases I go like, wow, they want to talk, they want me to talk about my artwork, but it's very difficult, but because of the story behind my work. The story behind my work is a true story, and for me to talk about those true stories is very difficult. When I'm creating my sculpture, I go like just expressing my anger, expressing my emotion, expressing. I just let it out when I'm creating sculptures. And as you know, I also does printmaking. So when I'm creating prints, I go like I want to give myself a certain peace. And when I'm creating prints, I don't think of anger. I don't think of emotions. I'm looking for peace. So I find I make it a little bit more easy to look at, so that I can at least give myself peace.
Thank you so much, Alicia. That's a really wonderful piece of insight. I think when I look at Alicia's works, I'm always struck by the visual language that she's created. It's almost the whole world. There's such incredible aesthetic similarities between the sculptures and the prints, and you can really see that in the use of line and texture. Yeah, great. There's another work by Alicia in this exhibition too that we'll come to later. So for now, I'll move down to Nikki Moreira's work. Oh, I should have also mentioned that there is a video. There are videos of all three artists speaking about their work that you can get to quite easily. If you click on the different artworks, you'll see. In that case, it's a voice note, but in other cases, there are videos as well. So if you want more, it's there. Cool. So this is a work by Nikki Moreira. It's called 10-10-10. And you can see in it, it's the Roman numeral for 10 is repeated. Something that I particularly love about this work and also Passage is the format that the work takes. So you'll see in these photographs that they are each discrete small pieces, and they can be reconfigured in different ways. And I think there's a wonderful flexibility to that is quite exciting to explore for anybody who gets to own or hang the work. So when Nikki has talked about this work before, she's spoken about how there's this incredible pressure on people to achieve this idea of a perfect 10, to really excel in all things and everything and never to fail. And I think I'll hand over now for her to talk a little bit about 10-10-10 and maybe Passages too, if she wants to.
What Helen said is right. This is it's about the perfect 10. It's about the pressure that we're under to be perfect. But just more on the technical. This is painted with a combination of acrylic and ink, and I think that it's the first time I've used these two materials together. So I like the way that it's a contrast between the soft and the hard. So that excited me about making this work. I think I should probably also say something about repetition, since all my work kind of involves a lot of repetition. And I also speak about this in the video that you can click on, but it becomes a kind of meditation when I'm painting. And sometimes, you know, I light on a shape or a series of patterns that I want to explore just because I find them aesthetically or visually pleasing. And then as I work on them, I sort of get into a long thought and meditation about why I'm doing them and how I'm doing them. And that's how they end up being significant, I think. So Passage is about, it became about the difficulty of getting ahead for young people and how hard it is for them to get into institutions of learning and to fulfill their potential. So although that might not be very obvious by the image in itself, I hope that you do watch the video, because that's essentially what these artworks are about. So they become something other than themselves, I hope.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that that's something that's very present in Nikki's works, is definitely that while they come from a specific set of ideas that she meditates on while she works, they are open to interpretation, and there are always visual references. I think, again, a bit like Alicia's works, there's a visual language that kind of is created and that comes through in all of these pieces. So when you start to explore her work, you see these same shapes reemerging over and over again. And actually, this might be a nice time to move straight down to this other piece by Nikki called 10,000 Crosses, that was created earlier this year in a live performance. This work also speaks to the prevalence of violence in Namibian society and its effect on Namibians, but especially women. It's, again, this is a very large piece that you don't really get a feeling for, because as much of a feeling for as you would if you were able to experience it in physical space. It's almost 6 meters long. I'll quickly move through to the last piece on this exhibition, and then we can open up for questions. So we're ending on another work by Alicia. As Alicia says, these works are very personal. And I think something that you'll see if you watch the videos of her working is the incredibly, all artists have a very intimate relationship with their works, but there's something about the way that Alicia holds and works on these pieces that strikes me every time I see her do it. There's an incredible intimacy. Maybe to speak a little bit about the materials as well that she's used. She uses plaster and wire and fabric. In this piece, you can see the fabric at the bottom of the sculpture. She also treats that fabric with wood, with glue to stiffen it. And they're also standing on wooden bases. I'm just going to quickly open up here to see if you can see. Yeah, so this video that there's here of Alicia's works opens with this image. And if you go to our website, you'll also see more works from this body of work. And I think this image specifically of Alicia among her works is definitely how I like to think about this body of work. Great. So at the end of the exhibition, there's a bit more text that you're welcome to read. The interviews with the artists again are at the bottom, and then 2 more links, one to a solo exhibition that Nikki had earlier this year at Guns N' Rain Gallery in Johannesburg, and Starts Along Volume 2, which was another exhibition that moved online due to COVID earlier this year that features other work by all 3 artists. So plenty to explore. I think I'm going to hand over to Gina now to field any questions that might have come through, and I'll stop sharing the screen.
Great, thanks Helen so much. Yeah, I think now is the time, if anybody has any questions, if you want to drop them into the chat, I will pick them up and relay them. We've, I think quite a lot to take in, so take your time. You can send things through as you think of them. And of course, if this ends and you're still thinking about something, we're always available to contact. But just while we wait for some questions, I have some questions. As much time as we spend with these artworks and the artists, the more we work on them and the more we think about them, more questions come up. And that's what I think we both love so much about the 3 artists we're working with here, is there's just like limitless depth to the work, and so much that you can read into it from your own, we all bring our own personal experience to an artwork, and that's what great about it, as well as then obviously the artist's personal experience. So perhaps I could ask Nikki. Helen talked initially about how you can reconfigure this body of work. So it's in passages you have 5 discrete pieces that make up one, and in 10-10-10 there are 6. When you're working on them, do you find that you work on them all at the same time, or do you work on one discrete unit and then move on to the next? And if so, how, or whichever your answer is, how do you find that then reflects in the movement of the piece?
So I work on them all together. My inspiration comes from painting and from the materials that I have at hand. So those little boxes, those kind of boxed wooden panels that I paint on, kind of were incredibly good to put next to each other. They're made very precisely and they fit together really nicely. So, and when I started painting on them, I painted on them as if they were one piece, and then started playing around with different configurations. So, that it all happens with a kind of suggestion as I'm working. I can't say that I planned it at all. Things happen accidentally and through the working process. I love the thought that art can be movable as well. That people can hang them anywhere they like, and they can move them around and maybe get new meaning out of them as they play with them.
Thank you. Fantastic. It's such an interesting thing to think about as well. An artwork being movable in somebody's home based on their own thoughts about it, and also maybe changing it around every so often. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah. So I don't really mind. Sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. I mean, people have often said to me, when they've bought a work of mine, that they like it upside down and they like it on the side. And I can't say it really worries me. Whatever pleases them to how they want to hang it is okay.
Yeah, great. I guess that's the thing with abstract. Although I from working with you, I know we've spent some time thinking this definitely is the top, and then you pass it over to somebody else, and it's like definitely not the top. So, great. There's a question coming in from Julie from Guns and Rain. Interested in Philippus's materials, including the nuts, which are also a source of food or protein for many Namibians. Philippus, do you choose this particular nut, the Makalani nut, for a reason, given that there are several different kinds of species to choose from?
All right. Yeah. There is a lot behind the Makalani nuts, and it is true. I thought of bringing the Makalani nuts to be known, because it wasn't enough done about it to expose these Makalani nuts and perhaps bring them to the gallery for people to view them. And after that, once they see the work, will be tempted to know also the meaning and the history behind of those materials. What happened is that in the past, women have been working a lot, trying to find food to cook a traditional vamblik, and they sell. And after that, they managed to buy some food and some clothes for their children, especially those single women. And not only that, but also used to be given to children. Sometimes, in tradition, people, they never had bread. Instead of having bread or apple and all those kind of other foods, they used to give those macaroni to children to eat. They have also used them to eat with porridge. There's a lot to tell about it. And I thought of, since we have been changed, even now, most of them, they even forget, they are not eating them anymore. These are some of the knowledge that we are losing. I thought of recording that, making an artwork that symbolizing and representing and reflecting all this kind of knowledge, cultural knowledge that we had in the past. Perhaps it will make a new meaning, and people will able to understand it a little bit more, to see how the identity has been shifting from past to the current situation. That was my concern.
That's really interesting, Philippus. Thank you so much for those insights. I think it's also, like I said, there's so many things that you can draw from all of your works, but it's particularly interesting, I find, is the mix between your bottle top, the use of bottle tops, which is, you know, a symbol for alcohol, and that we are so familiar with. But then these makalani nuts as well have so many different uses, but one of them is also to produce an alcoholic beverage, and that actually earns income for some people. And so, like you say, for some single mothers trying to, you know, feed their families, etc. And so it's a really interesting connection there, you know. So thank you so much for all of that.
Okay, welcome.
Great. If there are no other questions coming into the chat yet, I will take the opportunity to ask more questions. I was wondering, Alicia, if you could tell us a bit more. You've spoken a bit about your work being about a very personal thing, of course, but also something that is
public. Sorry, I've discovered that my headphones have just died. Can you all still hear me? Yes. Yeah. Yes, sorry. That your work is very personal, but also it spreads to a lot. It's something that many women can relate to, and the oppression, the silencing of women. But I also, you know, when Helen was talking about the picture that we took of you in amongst your sculptures, you've spoken about them being a kind of community, that people in the audience could maybe feel part of this community. And I wondered if you could maybe talk a little bit more about that community of your sculptures.
Yeah, when I create my work, I also think about their personal, that is true, but I also think about the people around me and the community and my society. And when I create my work, I want people to like look, not to, that's why in most cases I don't like talking about my work, because I don't want people to refer them to my story. I want them to refer them to me, to their story, because my story here doesn't matter, and I don't think if you even care about my stories. But I want you to refer these artworks to your own story. Look at the artwork, how it is created, and then think about your own story. If you have ever gone through a certain problem, or maybe somebody has treated you in a bad way, and this is created for you to like find your strength, and maybe just be able to face that person and say, look at this artwork, how do you feel about it? And then the person will be like, maybe the feeling is uncomfortable or something, and then you will be able to face this person and say, look, do you want me to feel like this? Do you want somebody who is feeling this way around you? Maybe, and then you will be able to tell that person that, think about it. Maybe in such way they will stop treating people the way they are treating them. That's why I say I created the community, and I want the community to speak. That's just me like bringing up a point so that we can talk about it.
Thank you so much. That's, yeah, it's so true that you created a community, you know, of a body of work, and I think that it's really interesting to think about people's, you know, your work being a conduit for people to experience their own or become closer to their own stories as well. So thank you so much for sharing that. We've got another question for you, Alicia. You're in the spotlight a bit. Coming from the project room, Frida at the project room, she says you combine quite a number of materials and especially techniques. You weld your own frames, you color your threads. Can you tell us a bit more about the process of putting together one of your works?
You said, can you repeat the question for me again, please?
Frida was just mentioning you weld your own frames and you also you dye your threads, and so there's a lot of work that goes into your sculptures. Maybe you can walk us through how you create your sculptures.
Yeah, I normally does that, like I weld my frame, and then I start to coloring my threads and everything, and it's about me finding power and just finding my position within the community. And because sometimes I feel like I'm not really in the community, I'm just alone. That's why I does different things, finding ways how I can get myself into the community. But to be honest, I don't know. It's a personal thing, and that's why I don't like to really talk about my work. It's too personal, and I don't want to go like personal because I think I don't matter. People matter. Look at my work. Find your own way within my work, and forget about myself and the reason why I create that work.
Cool, thanks, Alicia. I think I remember you telling me once that you, when you're thinking about the shape of your sculptures, you actually, when you're creating the frame, you mentioned that you draw first the shape of what the frame is going to look like on the floor, and then you weld that shape. Do you think, do those shapes, do they just come naturally, instinctively about what kind of shape you want to produce, or do you think about the different positions, and maybe you can talk a bit about that?
Sometimes they come naturally, but that's why they are. They come from the idea of maybe observing something from the community. Because in most cases, what I do, I observe from people, and then I find something interesting, whether it's the shape of somebody, and then I come up with my own abstract shape.
Wonderful, thank you so much. I've got, let's see, many positive feedback, comments. Peter Bateman has got a question coming through to Nikki. So Alicia, you can take a break. Nikki, so the thematic progress of your work over time. Peter Bateman has works from you dating back 20 years, good collector. I see you explore themes over an extended period of time. Can you say something about the shift from one theme or area of interest to the next? When do you feel like you've kind of completed a subject or a theme? When is it quote unquote done? And are these changes linked to life events, or are they a product of your artistic imagination?
Okay, Peter, nice to hear from you. It is, you know, how I select those shapes and which shapes last and which don't is it's so, I mean, it's like Alicia said, it's personal, and I can't really explain it. So some shapes and forms are just gifts that keep giving, and no matter how many times I use them and how many times I repeat them, they're still exciting to me. They still mean something. They still intrigue me, and I use them in different ways, and they're wonderful. So there's some shapes that I've used or that I've tried to use that I thought were great shapes, and they've never actually resulted in anything that I could even show anyone. So it is kind of a bit hit and miss. To find a shape that is enigmatic and meaningful and also aesthetically an interesting shape to use in a composition. That's kind of rare, and that's probably why I've been using the same shapes for so many years. So sometimes they just run out, you know. Then I don't use them anymore because they don't have any power anymore. So it's a great thing for me to find a new shape. It doesn't happen very often, which is why you see the same shapes and images recurring again and again, because those are the good ones. Those are the ones I keep.
Great, thanks so much. Can I ask a follow-up questions? I see there's some more questions coming in, but while we're on the topic, do you could you share with us what your most recent shape find has been?
I've been exploring a kind of an open window shape, but none of those are on this exhibition. Oh, I see Peter's just prompting me quickly. It's true. I did discover these the turnstile shape, and that was purely by chance. I've actually always loved turnstiles. I love the way they move. I love the way the lines intersect with each other. I like the way that they become something different every time they move. I also like the way that they demarcate a change in space. The way that people go through them and move through them, I find them intriguing. And so that is a new shape that I've been using, and I'm just actually in my studio at the moment. There are about 500 turnstiles. So I keep that is a good one. It might last a while.
That's
so, yes.
Yeah, it's funny because you're not funny. Funny is not the right word, but it makes me think even of passages, you know, and how that's also about movement and difficulty moving, or ease moving through from one space to another. And so, you know, even despite the different symbols, you know, the symbols don't necessarily delineate the theme. You know, they intermix and mingle. And I think in your work, what's made it so that you can use similar symbols over and over again is that they're never really exactly the same. You know, they stand for different things in different contexts and different spaces. And fantastic, thank you, Nikki. I've got
hang on. I'd like to just jump in here because Peter's question also made me think about the fact that over the last year I've been thinking a lot about some works that Nikki made probably decades ago now, that were a series of cages. And I think that there's that as much as shapes kind of come and go, there's also a certain sort of consistency that comes through over the years. And the shape of the cages is also comes up again in the shape of the temple works that she's done, and these enclosed spaces, and all of these. I mean, the cages are kind of an obvious example of this sort of restriction of movement, and that this movement is something that comes in again and is also very present in this the action of repetition that happens as well, and that sort of rhythm that's created in these works.
I think it's the kind of intersecting lines that really intrigue me, and that's you know, that's where it intersects between the personal and the aesthetic needs of the artwork. So I mean, the cages and the grids and the temples, they all kind of are part of the same family.
Fantastic, thank you so much. Really, yeah, great insights, Helen, as well. Please jump in. So we've got another question coming in from Nicola van Straten. Alicia, is it painful to part from your work when they're sold? The work, especially the sculptures, feel like real souls and peoples.
What's that again?
Do you find it difficult when your work sells, especially the sculptures that are like people? Do you find it difficult to be away from them when they sell?
Yes, of course. I always feel like when they are with me in the studio, I feel like I have a community there. And then when they leave, I feel like I have lost something. That's what I feel. It's very difficult to like lose some of my work.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. It's I think many artists will relate to that, you know, the feeling of you've spent so much time on this creation, and then you send them out into the world, and particularly with your work, like Nikki says, they feel like, you know, people. Thank you so much. There's a second question or another question coming in. So for any artist who feels that they would like to respond, what has time changed, if anything, about the way that you look at your own artistic process? So how do you feel perhaps that your artistic process has evolved, or how do you feel looking back on some of your older work? No takers.
Sometimes it's lovely to look at older work, and sometimes it's just horrifying. So I don't know if that's a useful addition to this conversation, but yeah.
No, that's an honest answer, I think. It's yeah, I think that's totally honest and totally true. Okay, and a second question from Nikki, Nicola van Straten to Philippus. Philippus, your pieces almost seem like something somebody could wear, like a second skin or a ritual garment. Are they meant to be hung or shown in a different way?
The work itself is not really something to wear. I just make it to be, seems like something stimulating our mind to think a little bit deeper and they start questioning about the culture. Like I said, it's made with culture. And for me, the reason why I go original, for me, the Africa, it's a Southern Africa. We are in Namibia. Nature color for me, it's very interesting. And the inspiration, perhaps I should say, and then the idea I was inspired from this cultural patchwork, which it was techniques that have been used by the women as well, collecting the leftover and start creating something. This is the searching of the power of the identity, and in many cases, women are people who have been left behind, were not given a chance to express themselves, and have a lot to build the nation. Because when you look at the people, everything was brought up by one generation. Therefore, I decided has more the material itself. I thought I should focus on the materials, on transform, because what they are doing, they're trying to transform the society with the knowledge and that they give to children when they are bringing them up. I should play around with those materials, change their shapes, putting them together. By joining them, it's like trying to search also about the unity And when we look at this, also what I said is that the disappearance of the identity includes names, includes language, it includes also food and all these kind of things, but the whole nations, there is a lot of components that could be as a form of patchwork, because the nation is not only one thing, it's many things that we put together, and then even the people themselves, when we set the nations, we have different types of tribes that speak different language, different foods, and all this kind of thing. That's why I wanted something that constructed from many, many, many components, and it become one strong and original.
Thank you so much, Philippus. I know that we're having a little bit of trouble with the connection with you, but I think we managed to hear quite a lot. I know when we were talking about how to photograph the works, just more to your question, Nikki, Philippus actually created these hooks that you can attach to part of the work and then hook it to another part of the work to create the kind of ripples that you see in some of the photographs. And when we were talking about it, Philippus, we were saying that these works could be, you know, hung from the ceiling, they could be on the floor. So there is definitely a flexibility in how they're shown, because they are almost, we call them, I like to think of them as sculptural textiles, because they have a kind of a body and a weight that that is really interesting and that can be played around with in space. It's also, I think, a link between what you've brought up, Nikki, in terms of it being a bit like a second skin or a garment of sorts, and Philippus actually having drawn on this idea of patchwork from traditional garment making. And so I think there's definitely some kind of a link, I mean, aesthetically as well. So thank you for that question and your answer, Philippus. Right, one more quick question. Oh, just a follow up from Peter Bateman to, I guess, to Nikki, when we were talking about your looking back on works or your artistic process. He asks, because I think you said that sometimes you look at it and it's wonderful, sometimes you look at it and it was awful. Is it even for works that you once liked, do you find that when you look back, you decide actually rubbish?
Yeah, that is quite interesting, because sometimes, I mean, sometimes it goes from one day to the next. You know, you think you absolutely love the work that you've done late at night, and you think and you go to bed really pleased with yourself because you think you've accomplished so much. And when you wake up in the morning, it's just awful, and you can't go with it. And sometimes you think something's absolutely terrible, and then a week later you look at it again and you quite like it. So, and it's difficult to. There are no rules, you know. I'm sure I speak for Alicia and Shihama and I, you know, the creative process is, it's a fickle friend, you know. Sometimes everything goes so well and sometimes it doesn't. And you know, sometimes things get purchased and leave your life, and then you see them again years later, and sometimes it's like seeing a wonderful old friend, and sometimes it isn't.
That's a nice way to describe it. Thanks, Nikki. We're going to take one last question before we just slowly wrap up. Again, for Nikki, actually, while you're here, from Nicola van Straten, in 10-10-10, you use the Roman numeral 10, which echoes, actually, she brings up an interesting relationship, echoes somehow in the 10,000 crosses. Have you thought about the 1 and the 0 in a 10? And that can also be considered binary code, system of patterns that also makes a vast network of complicated meaning.
I have. I think about that a lot. And I really like what computer coding looks like. You know, it looks like a wonderful, fascinating language that I know that I'll never understand. But I love the aesthetic of it. And yeah, that cross is such a beautiful thing to use. You know, no matter which way around you use it. It says so many things, you know. It's a voter's cross, and it's a kiss, and it's a mark of somebody who is illiterate in language that we use every day, written language. So It's one of those gifts that just has so much symbolic meaning and so much life in it that it's great to use, because it comes along with its baggage. Like Alicia said, you know, so many things have got so much baggage, and most of the baggage comes from the people that are actually looking at the work, which is where it should come from.
Thank you so much. Okay, wonderful. I think we're going to wrap it up. Helen, do you have any more comments, questions, things?
I have nothing apart from more thank yous. Thank you again to the artists for being here, for giving their time. Thank you, Gina, for taking us through everything so beautifully and fielding the questions. Thank you for everybody who is here still listening. I think we might try something slightly different for the end of this meeting. We might just ask anybody who wants to stay, and anybody who wants to leave, and we'll just peter out slowly. So if anybody's been desperate to have their voices heard, to say something out loud, you can, but also...
Yeah. Before you go, if you'd like to, I've just put just before Nikki's last question, I've put a whole host of links into the chat, which have more links to the exhibition, as well as video content that we've produced, as well as that our Turbine Art Fair has produced, our website, things like that. So if you want to have a quick squiz there, echoes to Helen, thank you so much, everybody, and let's stay on if you'd like to, and you're welcome to leave and enjoy the rest of your evening if you prefer. Thank you so much all for your time.